Hi guys, I hope you're all doing good. I'm trying here to finish reading what I had started before in a video of YouTube that I published in my channel as Saida Muhammad or Saida Sadiq. You can't find me there. And today I'm reading this chapter, which is about human rights and modernity. We make a living with what we get, but we make a life with what we give. In his serious and objective approach to human rights and modernity, Sven Linguist warns the contemporary conscientious in a very specific terms regarding the extent of the shadow of genocide in modernity. He states, "You already know enough, so do I. It's not knowledge we lack. What is missing is the courage to understand what we know and to draw conclusions. If we are to follow linguists, we need an interpretation of history that looks at the past from an array of geographical and historical point of view. It's a more comprehensive vision of modern history and of the crisis of modernity that will provide us with an all-encompassing landscape in which human rights need to be taught. Having as a background this vast landscape of the disaster of modernity, the Universal Declaration can be seen as a response to all modern crimes in which widespread massacres of civilians were involved. The genocides and crimes against humanity committed during the First and Second World War should all be taken into account, as well as the genocide that occurred once the Universal Declaration was proclaimed. And looking at the entire history of modernity, the conquest of America and the colonization of the Third World should also be adopted as part of the panorama of absolute cruelty that the moral fiber of the Declaration opposes. We citizens of the world at the dawn of the 21st century should understand ours as a post-conquest human rights culture. Perhaps in this way, the universal appeal of the Declaration would come as a result not only of the world constituency of states that have signed its text, but also from the ecumenical jurisdiction of the victim of modernity, from which the Universal Declaration seeks inspiration and breathes in times of globalization and neocolonialism. Human rights as a product of modernity are hugely successful in terms of number of treaties and ratification activities of international human rights bodies, expansion into new areas such as relation between private actors, and the real progress achieved in areas such as the abolition of the death penalty. At the same time, several contemporary developments may, in the long term, erode the concept of human rights as developed since the Age of Enlightenment and undermine support for it. Three challenges are in the foreground. First, the decline of state power, in particular the phenomenon of fragile state and the negative impact of weak state institutions on human rights, such as the prohibition of torture. Second, the utilitarian challenge to the validity of core human rights guarantees, particularly in the context of the war on terror. And third, the loss of empathy as a precondition for recognizing the rights of others, even if they are our enemies. Third, though the Human Rights Declaration is basically intended to be universally implemented, it has been politically manipulated by the powers of the North as a means of exercising domination over the third world countries. After the dismemberment of the Soviet Union, the United States of America became the sole political power. Liberalism and capitalism became consequently the global principles of the New World Order, making the end of history according to Fukuyama. On the other hand, and according to Samuel Huntington's theory of the clash of civilization, the American Quarterly Foreign Affairs in summer 1993 theorized the principal conflict of global politics would occur between nations that belong to different civilizations. Huntington identified 7 of these nation civilizations, among which is Islam, alongside the Western civilization. As a matter of fact, his cultural conception of the Islam as a religion and his understanding of the Muslim culture is connected with economic, social, and political situation, which could have an impact on his positions. Moreover, Huntington considered Muslim culture as non-developed economically, socially, and politically. However, he emphasizes more on cultural effect, as it has more impact on the understanding civilization. That's why when he says cultural, he includes civilization that is a cultural entity. He considers a civilization as the highest cultural grouping of people and the broadest level of cultural identity people have, short of that which distinguishes humans from other species. In addition to this, Samuel Huntington argued that it's defined both by common objective elements such as language, history, religion, customs, institutions, and by the subjective self-identification of people. He openly explains his conception of the culture by giving examples from the reality. He states that people have levels of identity. For example, a resident of Rome may define himself with varying degrees of intensity as a Roman, an Italian, a Catholic, a Christian, a European, a Westerner. The civilization to which he belongs is the broadest level of identification with which he intensely identifies. People can and do redefine their identities, and as a result, the composition and boundaries of civilizations change. The question is not whether this view is valid or not. The more important is the reference made to global conflict, a reference that points to the dilemma third world countries have with regard to human rights. For the majority of the people in these countries, who suffered and still suffer the consequences of the imperial and colonial exploitation of their resources. The Human Rights Declaration is understood as a Western product aiming at protecting the welfare of the Western citizen at the expense of the welfare of the non-Western nations. This understanding is supported by the socio-cultural level maintained in these societies, a cultural level which has not yet reached the cultural standard of modernity and modern values. Moreover, cultural diversity, which is used by military or semi-military governments of the Third World to justify their totalitarian political system, is also used to justify the difficulties of the implementation of human rights. In addition to this, Jose Manuel Barreto exposed in an interesting article titled Human Rights and the Crisis of Modernity the horrors of the Second World War, in particular the real hell of Auschwitz, which are usually seen as the background from which the Universal Declaration of Human Rights emerged. He is considering the era we live in as a post-Holocaust human rights culture. Indeed, it was in this spirit that the 60th anniversary of the declaration was commemorated last year, such as a contextualization of international human rights law is sustained by a certain interpretation of the crisis of modernity. Critical theory and postmodern philosophy from Adorno and Habermas to Derrida, Lyotard, and Agamben share the assumption that Auschwitz occupies the place of the founding event of our times. Thus, the Holocaust has been adopted by the European intelligentsia and the dominant historical consensus as the event that incarnates the crisis of the modern age. The killing of more than 6 million people in the Nazi extermination camps meant that modern culture produced the opposite it sought, and as a result, civilization collapsed. When speaking about modernity, it is always referred to the industrial period when the human civilization reached its ultimate progress in the West. On the other hand, for the Eastern civilization, it is very appropriate to speak about the kind of modernity Islam brought to the world in the 7th century to explain how this modernity was carried out and developed by Muslims till the 12th century. Nowadays, Muslims, however, are very reluctant to accept contemporary modernity on the grounds that most of its values contradict Islamic values, or that they rather stem from human legislation, while Islamic values are originated in divine revelation. The problem here is not religious or theological, but it is rather a socio-cultural and political problem. Nevertheless, this concept was introduced to Muslim countries through colonization with the use of military power. As modernity concept was imposed by force to traditional Muslim societies, the assimilation of this concept was always and still is perplexed. It is that of the colonizer and the master, the enemy and the teacher. Modern Muslim thinkers are unlike their ancestors, torn off between hate and admiration. enmity, and love. In this context, modernity is desired because it is practical, but rejected because it represents threats to traditional identity. As a matter of fact, the image of West, as projected in literature and perceived by the elites, constitutes an essential element in studying the problem that keep the distance and maintain the difference. All the political regimes in the Muslim world, on the other hand, seem to enjoy a mutilated modernity and a modernity without a rationality, as that is a reference. Even with the case of Turkey, the only Muslim country even ever to claim to be a secular state, modernity is under military censorship. The absence of the civic society institution, which is the only insurance for its continuity, is a very remarkable symptom of the mutilated modernity. In addition to this, the concept of modernity in West is connected with the industrial evolution in Western civilization. For that, huge changes have occurred in economy, mode of production, social values, and political institutions. In this copy of modernity, individualism is always considered as threat to the community's solidarity, although it emphasized in the original essential text of Islam. Theoretically, human rights are absolutely universal as model, principle, and ideals. But in reality, things are different as political practice in most Western countries has not yet reached that level of universality. On the other hand, Islam as a religion is also ideal, universal, and also very human, but the socio-cultural and political situation of most Muslim countries does not allow the original message of Islam to be decoded. The world needs to change in order to reach the high level of the model principles of humanity. A cultural network of intellectuals should carry the responsibility of creating humanitarian values worldly likewise, equality, justice, and the freedom between nations and culture. That was about human rights and modernity. I'll stop here. I wouldn't go further because here I see a new chapters. So I don't want to start new chapters today. I will do it another time, and I give you this gap of time for you to watch or listen to this, and you can leave your comments if you subscribe to this channel, and you can, by doing so, leave your comments. Thank you for watching. I hope you get some information from what I have searched for some time. I put all my time and energy and efforts in searching and trying to put these ideas and my own together so I can write a book like this one. And I really appreciate if you watch and get me your comments, so I will take in consideration in my future career as a writer. Thank you for watching and enjoy your day. See you.